When I first read this story, it hit me really close to home. Not only did it happen to a very avid deer hunter just like myself, but it actually happened about 2 miles north of a spot that I solo bow hunt all the time. Now, this story is nothing like anything I've done on the channel yet, but it's nonetheless just as terrifying. But before we get into today's encounter, welcome back to Dark Wilderness, where I share encounters with the unexplained. If you've had an encounter that you would like to share, please email it to me at the link below. And if you like today's story, please gently slap that like button, as I'll be getting back to uploading multiple times every week. So don't forget to tell that subscribe button where you're going and when you'll be back, so you don't miss out on any future content. Now, let's get into today's encounter. This encounter comes from Bryson, and it happened in late October of 2009 while he was out muzzleloading out in Eastern Manitoba. He was muzzleloading in an area called Skull Lake, which is located right on the western border of the Whitetail Provincial Park. The Whitetail Provincial Park's located right along the Manitoba and Ontario border, and this area is absolutely beautiful, but it is incredibly rugged as well. It's full of lakes, rivers, bogs, streams, rocky hills, and absolutely super dense forests. On the morning of his encounter, he left his house in Beausejour, Manitoba at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he had to head east down Highway 44 to this little town called Rennie, Manitoba. Now, Rennie's located right on the border of the park itself, and it's an area he always used to stage his hunts from. So when he got to Rennie, he turned north on this little road, and he went about a half a kilometer till he came to a set of railroad tracks. Now, there's a set of tracks there that runs east to west, and it's actually a CP rail line, and there's a little service road that runs along those tracks. You're technically not supposed to use that because it's actually railway property, but a lot of people that hunt out of that area do actually use those little service tracks to get from point A to point B, especially if they're going anywhere near where Skull Lake is. And that's exactly what Bryson was going to be doing on this morning. So he pulled his truck over beside the tracks, got out, unloaded his quad, grabbed his gear, and then he started heading west down this line. Well, about 5 kilometers west of Rennie, there's another set of rail tracks that actually intersect and cross over that rail line itself. And those tracks run north up towards Brereton Lake. That's also another CP rail line as well. Now, this is the only way to get into Skull Lake. You cannot drive into Skull Lake. You have to enter by foot or by quad. And even with a quad, 90% of the time, you cannot make it all the way to Skull Lake. The bush is just way too thick, and there's a lot of windstorms in the area, so there's always fallen trees across this really old, grown-in trail. But that's exactly where Bryson had to go. So when he got underneath the bridge of the rail line, he turned his quad north, and he started going down that really old, narrow quad trail heading north towards Skull Lake. So Bryson made his way north down that little quad trail using just the lights of his quad to see as he was going. He went about 1.5 miles until he came to this big rock right in front of him. Now, he could not actually get his quad around this rock, but it didn't matter because that's where he parked his quad anyway. He kind of used that rock as a bit of a landmark just so that no matter where he was, if he saw that rock, he knew his quad was there. So when he got to the rock, he turned his quad off, grabbed his gear, and he started heading on foot northeast away from that rock. About 500 yards from where he parks his quad, there's a valley, and there's a ridge on the south side, and there's a ridge on the north side as well. And on that south ridge, Bryson had actually built a bunker blind out of fallen trees, logs, and brush. And that bunker blind overlooked into that valley, and it's a spot that he loved to hunt because that valley acted as a perfect natural funnel for the deer. So by the time Bryson got to his bunker blind, the sky was already starting to lighten up a little bit. So once he got there, he kind of laid his kit out, got settled in for the day's hunt. About 45 minutes into legal light, Bryson looked over to the east and he actually saw a doe making her way through the valley from the east heading west. Now, Bryson was not out to just shoot any deer. He had this one specific buck that he had set as his target buck, and that was a deer he wanted. So he wasn't focused too much on this doe as she made her way through the valley. He was looking past her to see what might be following her. See, it was the end of October. It was the middle of the pre-rut, and Bryson knew that that was the best time to be in the woods if you want to get your target buck, because they're going to be the most predictable during the pre-rut as opposed to the rut. So he was just focused on watching behind this doe to see if that buck was going to be following her. That doe made it about halfway through that valley, and she just stopped. As soon as she stopped, she turned her head to the north and she started looking up that north ridge. First thing Bryce had thought was, is there another hunter on the north side? Because the wind was blowing to his face, and the way that this deer was acting, she was acting kind of just how deer typically act if they scent a human. She was staring and she was stomping her front foot. She did that for a few seconds, and then she turned and she booked it back to the east the way she came. She was alert blowing the entire time as well. So Bryson instantly thought, okay, for sure, there's another hunter on the north side here. But he decided to just carry on with his hunt. He was really hoping, though, that if there was somebody on that north ridge, that it wouldn't mess him up too bad, just because of the way that the wind was going. About 20 minutes later, Bryson spotted a little spike buck coming through that same valley. And that buck had his nose right on the ground, and he was following that doe's trail. When it got to about 10 yards from where that doe stopped, Bryson said all of a sudden from the north side of the valley on that north ridge, he heard this loud metal clank. And he said his first thought was that for sure there was another hunter on the north side, and that guy's tree stand just fell and he's going to need help. Well, he also said that as soon as that clank happened, that buck turned and it took off back to the east. So Bryson, being the outdoorsman that he is, knew that he could not leave somebody wounded in the bush. So he just yelled out to the guy. He yelled out, "Hey, are you okay?" And he got no response. After a couple more seconds, he yelled out again, and again, he got no response. So now in his mind, he's thinking, this person's hurt. They've probably knocked themselves out, and he has to get to them. So he yelled out one more time. He just yelled out, "Hey, I'm coming to you. Don't shoot." So he grabbed his muzzleloader, left all of his other kit behind, and he made his way down about this 25-foot embankment down into this valley. He crossed the valley and he went up that north ridge. And when he got up to the top, he kind of looked around a little bit to see if he could see any sign of this other hunter. Now, in Manitoba, during any of the gun seasons, you have to wear blaze orange. You have to wear a blaze orange vest, a blaze orange hat, and blaze orange stands out like crazy in the bush. And Bryson did not see any orange anywhere. So he spent about an hour just kind of walking around through the bush on the north side of this valley, looking for any signs of this hurt hunter. After an hour of not finding any sign at all, he decided he was going to go back to his quad, head back to Rennie, and he was going to alert the RCMP and the local conservation officer that there's probably somebody hurt in the bush here, and he was actually going to take them to that location where he had heard that clank. So he turned around and he started making his way south again back towards that valley, and all of a sudden he actually stumbled upon this old prospector camp. He said it was just loaded with old rusted out tin cans, rusted out equipment, and a couple of old rail lines as well. So when he got there and he noticed all this metal absolutely scattered throughout the area, he also noticed there was a lot of bear sign in the area as well. He actually came across a very fresh pile of bear scat. So now his mind kind of changed focus, and now he wasn't thinking so much that it was another hunter. He started to think that, okay, that clank that he had heard was more than likely a bear rummaging through all this old rusted metal, and that's probably what made that sound. So now he was not feeling overly concerned, because now he's just like, okay, this solves the mystery. It was just a bear. So he decided he was just going to go back to where his bunker blind was, grab all of his gear, head back to his quad, and he was just going to go hunt about half a kilometer south of where he had parked his quad. Just because at this point now he had made so much noise in the area, he figured it was not worth hunting there anymore. So he started heading south, got to the top of that north ridge, went down that embankment, crossed the valley, went up to the south ridge, got to where his bunker blind was, and he decided he was just going to have a real quick drink of water, have a quick energy bar, and then he was going to grab his stuff and head to the quad. So he kind of stood there for a few seconds, just trying to catch his breath, just because of that log walk he had just done. He said as he was standing there, it was like somebody flipped a switch. He said all of a sudden all the noises in the area just completely stopped and it went dead quiet. As soon as that happened, he felt this overwhelmingly hot feeling go through his entire body. He said he instantly felt like he was overheating. So he unzipped his jacket and he said that's the last thing that he remembers. He says next thing he knows, he said it was like he woke up. He could not describe the feeling other than the feeling of waking up. So he wakes up, he's still standing up, but he's completely freezing cold. He's not wearing his jacket, and it is completely pitch black outside. So he's standing there looking around, trying to figure out exactly what's going on because when he got to his bunker blind, he had looked at his watch and it was 11:26 a.m. at that point. And now it's completely pitch black and he's freezing and he's not wearing his jacket. After a few seconds of kind of trying to collect himself a little bit, he notices his jacket's lying on the ground, so he picks that up, puts that on, and he's still looking around trying to figure out like what just happened to me. He ended up looking at his watch and it was 10:17 p.m. At this point, everything else that's happened, he's just freaking right out because now he's trying to figure out like how did 11 hours pass and how do I have no recollection of what happened? So he quickly just grabbed all of his stuff, threw his muzzleloader over his shoulder, and even though he would generally know that to his left, which would be to the west, was where his quad was, he pulled out his compass just to confirm the direction, just because he was so confused at what just happened. And when he looked at his compass, north was actually pointing to his right. Well, where he was, north should have been directly in front of him, not to his right. Now, Bryson said he takes very good care of his gear and he always confirms his gear before he goes in the bush. And he said that morning his compass was reading correctly. At this point, he decided he was just going to head in the direction that he was confident was west, which was off to his left. And he was absolutely correct. That was the correct direction. Left from where he was west. So he made his way through the bush all the way back to his quad, got on the quad, and he said he drove all the way back to Rennie. He said he was driving like somebody was chasing him. When he got back to his truck, he quickly loaded the quad into the back, and he just headed home. Bryson said he has not been back out to Skull Lake. Actually, he has not been back out to the Whiteshell at all. He said he will not go back to the Whiteshell. He has since given up hunting, and he doesn't even like going into the bush anymore. He has no idea what happened to him that day, but it has freaked him out so bad that he has given up his top passion, which was hunting, and he will not go out and hunt anymore after this. When Bryson was telling me the story, it gave me a little bit of a chill, just because as I mentioned before, this happened less than 2 miles north of a spot that I personally bow hunt by myself all the time. And actually about 4 or 5 years ago, I was out there with one of my hunting partners, and I have a tree stand located on this one ridge. It's a little bit of a clearing, and there's this big ridge, and I have a tree stand located right in the middle. And about 250 yards to the west, there's another clearing with a big ridge in there as well. And my hunting partner was going to go check out that other clearing, and I actually watched him walk through the bush into that clearing, and about 2 minutes later, he came walking back, and he said that when he got into that clearing, he said he had this overwhelming feeling of just turn around and get out of there. And he said the area went completely quiet. He said as soon as it went quiet, that's when he decided, nope, that's it. And he headed right back towards where I was. Now, some of the stuff that Bryson brought up during this encounter really made me think of some of the missing 411 stuff done by David Paulides. Some of the stuff like that metallic clank, heard that in a few of David Paulides' cases where people say they sounds like a metal door slamming in the forest. I actually asked Bryson that exact question. I said, did it sound like a metal door slamming? And he said, not really. He said it did sound like a metal door slamming. He said it just sounded like a loud metallic clank. So that kind of just made me think of that point, but that's always brought up by David Paulides in the Missing 411, of people hearing that metallic sound. Another thing that kind of made me think of that as well is the fact that he said he felt super hot to the point where he felt like he was overheating and he had to unzip his jacket. That just kind of made me think of some of the cases where people are found without articles of clothing that they went into the bush with. And the fact that there's that 11 hours that he cannot account for. It went from daylight to nighttime like that for him. Now, also, this area where this happened, where Skull Lake is, and the Whiteshell Provincial Park, there's another lake to the south side of the park that's called Falcon Lake. There's actually a very famous UFO encounter from Falcon Lake. It is most commonly referred to as the Falcon Lake incident. It happened on May 20th of 1967 to a man named Stan McCallick. He had been out prospecting on the shores of Falcon Lake when he saw a craft come across a lake and actually land on the rock right by him. And when he walked up to this craft and he touched it, he ended up getting completely covered in burns. So that just kind of makes you wonder, like, what exactly happened to Bryson this day? Are all these things related? It might be something we're just never going to know. But I know it's something that I'm definitely going to keep in the back of my mind the next time I'm out in that area, especially if I'm out there alone. I'm definitely going to be making sure that I let my wife know that I'm going to be home at a specific time. Because if I'm not, I want her calling somebody to come look for me. Well, that's it for today's encounter. I just want to take a second just to say I know I have not uploaded too much over the last month. November's super busy for me. As you guys know, I'm a very avid deer hunter. And I actually also take out a lot of new hunters to kind of get them into the sport. So November's just been absolutely hectic. Now that the season's pretty much over though, I'm going to be able to get right back into the full swing of things here for you guys. So as always, if you like today's story, please hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, let that subscribe button know where you're going and when you'll be back. And we'll see you next time.